My name is Carlos Morales. I will be presenting the War in the Middle East speech. War. Something that has been around since the existence of man. Countless wars, countless battles within those wars, victories, losses, depending on what side you were on. Allow us to turn back the hands of time, taking us back 9 years to the year of 2001, a year that most Americans will never forget. Many of us, including myself, were only babies, with no recollection of where we were at or of what we were doing with our families when this tragedy occurred. We are, of course, talking about the unfortunate event of 9/11, the day that would ultimately resort to the United States waging war on terrorism, a war that we still fight to this day. This means that American troops have been sacrificing, fighting, and dying on foreign soil to carry out the mission of the United States and defend our Constitution basically ever since I was born. Everybody who was old enough at that time to understand what was happening remembers exactly where they were at and exactly what they were doing when they found out about the act of terrorism. For many, it was a calling to be the first to defend our Constitution, which led them into joining the armed forces in order to protect our country and its people. I bring you all here today to speak about where the darkest things of what one human being can do to another takes place. We're talking about war. We, of course, are not talking about any war. We're talking about the ongoing war which has plagued the Middle East with terrorism and violence. The same war that a lot of us probably have had or have a family member who has fought or is currently fighting to protect us and keep us safe. Nowadays, Americans are still very separated on terms of their political views and moral values. Instead of agreeing to disagree, most people in America either stand on the far left or they stand on the far right. Very few, however, are smart enough to do what we did when this tragedy happened, and that is meeting in the middle. I was not old enough to see it for myself, but for the ones who were, I hear about how great and how truly inspiring it was to see all Americans come forth as one. At that time, it did not matter who you voted for. It did not matter if our moral values aligned. It did not matter if we agreed on the same policies. None of this mattered. What mattered at that time was coming together to get to the conclusion of we love our country. What are we as Americans going to do about this? In which this is in fact what weighed in the heavy decision of protecting the nation that we built by leaving our homes and going overseas straight into the heart of where terrorism lies, the Middle East. The beginning of the war was horrific to say the least. War itself is truly horrifying, but this is a war won like we have never seen before. Going into a completely new environment from which we are not used to is one of our greatest challenges. In World War II, it was urbanized warfare where Allied troops fought and pushed their way through urban cities in France and Germany in order to stop the Axis. In Vietnam, our troops had to fight a new and different style of war, which is called jungle warfare. They had to adapt to the intense and scorching heat and humidity, which is heavy within itself, but that was the least of their worries. They were more worried about the Vietnamese snipers who were hiding in their trees. They were more worried about the kamikaze who were in foxholes in the grounds and constantly running into them on these patrols through the jungle. Moving on to the current war that we face today, we come across a new type of war. Not just the fact that this one takes place in a sandy desert, but the enemy harbors new types of weapons of mass destruction. War has never been a clean or pretty process. It has always been dirty and ugly. There is no way to say which war is or was worse than another, but in my opinion, troops have to deal with something very catastrophic, which I would personally be most paranoid about more than anything else. And we, of course, are talking about IEDs, or in other words, improvised explosive devices, bombs that are handmade by terrorists. I could go on and on of the disgustingly creative ways that these terrorists use these bombs not only against us, but against their own people. I will give a few examples in order to paint a real picture of the differences in all of these wars. Most people know about the countless IEDs which are set on the main roads to target heavy infantry assault vehicles which can carry American troops. Another way is they will strap these IEDs onto another human being who's either willing to die or is mentally handicapped so they don't even know what's going on. They will just strap the bombs to them, send them into a crowd of civilians or American troops, and well, you know what happens after that. On the bright side of things, however, after years and years, after countless sacrifices, and after many casualties, the US, with the help of other allied countries, are now getting to the point of the war where we are occupying less bases overseas and we are pulling more and more troops out every year. That is, of course, up until what I like to call the Great Scare. This, of course, is whenever Trump called a drone strike on the Iranian general which could have potentially started World War III. Thankfully, the Iranian chief said he does not wish death to America nor the American people, but only wishes death to Trump and the other higher-ranking military personnel who were personally involved for the drone strike, which means, in other words, we avoided a whole war. War is the most raw, unfiltered version of what one man could do to another man for the greater cause that is valued to that individual. This war has lasted throughout the presidency of 3 different people, but war is something that has happened since the beginning of civilization. And unfortunately, it will continue to happen long after we are gone and dead. And who knows, it could even happen again in our lifetime. It already has once.